Dr. David Krohse here, and I wanted to share a little bit about just how you need to be asking about the costs of everything, but especially if you have a deductible, a higher deductible type of health plan. And so I learned this lesson personally. Anybody that's had to go in for any significant amount of care, you're going to learn at some point that healthcare has gotten very expensive. So my own situation, this is probably back in, let's say, 2009 or 2010, but I had gotten what seemed to be a bad case of food poisoning, and so I was having diarrhea for a few days, and I let it go a couple days. But when it was at 4 and 5 days, I thought I should go into the care clinic and ask them to find out what's going on. And so I went into one of these local family clinics, and I straight up requested that they try to figure out what's going on, do a stool analysis. Now, in my head, I thought, that analyzing some poop, it sounds like it should be a pretty basic procedure. An estimated cost of, I thought around $100. And so I didn't ask how much it was going to be. At the time, I had what would be considered a medium deductible plan. So I had a $1,500 deductible. And I remember they analyzed it. They didn't find anything wrong with me, and I did get back to normal. But ultimately, I got the bill. It was $497 to analyze that stool sample. And so when I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like if I would have known it was going to be $500, I would have considered whether that was really worth it. But it was on me to ask that question. And so ever since then, I ask what things are going to cost. I remember about 4 years ago, I was messing with one of my bikes in the winter, and I'd been out riding on this gravel road, and so the bike was covered in dust, and I went to spin the front wheel, and the disc brake on the bike had a bunch of dust on it, so it made this terrible sound. And I just went and I was like, oh, I'll clean the dust off of this disc caliper, or the actual disc portion. And so I stuck my fingers on it, and the wheel was spinning, and it sucked my finger into the disc caliper part, and it nearly it nearly took off the top of my finger. So I went into urgent care, and I got like 7 stitches, which was totally necessary. But then they said, oh, we should get you up to date on your tetanus shot. And I asked them, I was like, I know this is going to sound paranoid, but how much is a tetanus shot? And they did. They acted like I was paranoid. But I kind of told them, I said, sorry, I got surprised by a bill once. And it ended up being $60, which was what I would expect, or somewhere around there. But again, if you don't ask, you don't know. Again, a lot of us have heard that diabetes medicines, they've shot up like hundreds or thousands of %. So how do you know which medicine has skyrocketed in the last couple of years? And, if they would have told me that, yeah, this tetanus shot we're going to give you is $700, I would have said, well, can we ask some questions about getting a cheaper version of that? So it's on you to ask questions in general in healthcare, but especially if you have a high deductible type of plan, you have to ask, what am I responsible for? What am I on the hook for? And the best book that I have to recommend, if you're interested in learning how to really be an advocate for yourself with healthcare and the costs, is called An American Sickness. And I found this book randomly through the Des Moines Library's audiobook system, and I started listening, and it's a nonfiction book, but it tells how healthcare in America went from being very reasonable to being super expensive, just out of hand. And again, some providers are in network, some providers are out of network. You can get surprised by costs. I read this, and my wife came in one day and she asked me what I was reading, and I told her this book. And she said, oh, that sounds like it'd be kind of boring. And I said, it's not really. Like reading this book, it's kind of like getting multiple kicks into the solar plexus. I mean, it's painful to read, and there's jaw-dropping moments about how our healthcare went from being a system where it's designed to help us to being very much a money-making system. And so I'm going to put below this video the resources. So she has resources. These are little checklists that she says before you go into any kind of a healthcare procedure, you should print these out and you should be asking these questions. And if you never want to get surprised by these medical bills, you never want to go bankrupt because of healthcare expenses, read this book, have your family read it, or be an advocate for your parents, your sister, your brother, your kids. But these are resources that I want you to have so that, again, you can survive and thrive in this medical healthcare system in America.